The Lakers have a big decision, or rather decisions, to make this summer. Everything involving Austin Reaves, Dalton Knecht, Rui Hachimura, and literally every trade asset they have available to them. AKA, they gotta decide on whether to trade them or keep them going forward, which according to reports might not align with the fan ideas that many have for them. According to Jovan Buha, The Athletic, the Lakers are quote-unquote not looking to move Austin. They value Austin. They view him as a future All-Star. And then for Dalton Knecht, also have a report on him. Per Chris Mannix, the Lakers will quote-unquote use the assets that they put in the deal for Mark Williams, specifically Dalton Knecht and the first-round draft pick. They'll try to put those pieces back together and acquire someone.
When they had the no-brainer trade for Luka, when all the pieces settled, just like, okay, which is why they reached out for Mark Williams, didn't get it. What do the Lakers do from here? What happens now?
You know, I don't think they'll reconstitute the Mark Williams deal, but they will use the assets that they were going to put in that deal, specifically Dalton Knecht and the first-round pick that they have to trade. You saw Dalton Knecht fall out of the rotation. I think they'll try to put those pieces back together and acquire somebody. The question is, like, who better than Mark Williams is going to be available? And you survey the landscape, it's not a great trade landscape for players. I mean, you're not going to go get Derek Lively out of Dallas or Gafford out of Dallas. They're still trying to win something in the Western Conference. But there's no question that priority number one for Rob Pelinka has to be finding that kind of pogo stick of a center that has been proven to thrive opposite Luka Doncic.
So with that in mind here, what are the Lakers' options and what are their plans with them? Should they be to trade them? Should they be to keep them? What can they value them at and what can they hope to get for them? Or are they even looking at the right direction here, per reports anyway? We'll talk about that and try to break it all down here. But before we get too far into it, if you love talking about the NBA or simply the Lakers, then don't forget to check out our NBA Discord. We got a daily discussion board, a live game chat, and much more to talk about everything NBA. Or if you don't have Discord, then feel free to follow me on Twitter, X, or whatever you want to call it to hear my thoughts on everything NBA and Lakers related. But now getting back to our topic, and beginning with Austin Reaves, and I think it's pretty important to have this conversation, obviously for us, but even more so for the Lakers. Is it worth trading him? Is it worth keeping him? What should they do with him? And what will that actually impact their team with, both in the short term and long term future? Definitely a bunch of ways you could approach that. Definitely a bunch of differing opinions on it, and depending on who you ask, they might tell you one thing or then go in the complete opposite direction. So all we can do is speculate, talk about the current reports, and obviously about his current contract, his current trade value, and then probably what his value might be after his next contract, which could be anywhere from $30 million according to a new report. Or rather, I guess, speculation by Eric Pincus, a salary capologist via Bleacher Report. And what he had to say about it is the fact that Reaves is very likely to decline his player option, which will be worth $14.9 million next season. Not this upcoming one, but during the 2026-27 NBA season, which I think is very likely to happen, and I think we can all agree on that. And if he would then decline that, he believes that Reaves would then seek a salary in the $30 million range, which would obviously be a price jump for him and definitely a pay increase that the Lakers might not be able to afford at that point. Maybe they will, maybe LeBron will retire and they don't have to try to combine all three of their salaries on the payroll. But even apart from that, will he be worth that amount? Maybe he won't be, but he definitely won't have the great value that he does right now in his current contract, which is only worth roughly $13 million for next season. And no, they unfortunately cannot really get ahead of that right now. They're not eligible to offer him a contract extension until July 9th, and at that point, the most they can even offer is roughly $20 million per year. It would be worth $19.5 million in 2026-27, which would be a slight pay increase for him, but definitely not enough for him to accept it, at least not for right now. So with that in mind here, should they instead look to trade him, capitalize on his current trade value, or what fans seem to think that is, even though the same fans often say to trade him because they don't want him, but they expect an absolute trade haul for him. So with that in mind here, what could they actually get from him, and would it be the better idea to trade him rather than keep him and play the waiting game with that contract? Again, that's definitely up for debate, but if we're talking about trade value here, there's definitely many differing opinions on it, and I'm kind of in the middle of it, I guess. I wouldn't say they can trade him for a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo. I think that's absolutely ridiculous, and they can't even come close to that, neither by contract value or even simply salary to make the trade work financially. We're not playing NBA 2K here, so that won't work. Or even talking about draft picks and what I'd compare his trade value to via draft picks, I wouldn't go as far as some fans saying that he could be traded for an equivalent of 3 to 4 first-round draft picks. I think that's a bit too far. Or then on the lowball end, some fans who don't really like him and simply want to get rid of him might compare him to only 1 first-round draft pick. I'm more so in the middle of all that. I'd say between his current production, the upcoming contract with him, and what he may or may not be able to offer, and gotta factor in his age, he is fairly young yet at only 26, I'd say he'd be worth roughly 2 to 3 first-round draft picks. Maybe slightly more, maybe slightly less, but somewhere in that general range. I don't think that's too unfair to ask, and not too unfair to compare him to. But what would that actually mean in regard to a player comparison and what they could trade him for? Well, I kind of did compare this during a previous video. Some fans liked it, some fans did not like it, but I think the best comparison I can find for it, everything in regard to age, current value, and then even salary to compare him to, would be a guy like Herb Jones, for example. And yes, I know he was hurt last season and the numbers don't reflect his overall value, but everything in regard to age, he has an identical age to Austin Reaves. Salary, they literally have an identical salary for next season. They're very different on the court. Austin is more productive offensively, while Herb Jones is much more productive defensively, even having a first-team all-defense to his name and being a top 5 defensive player of the year candidate at one point. So they're definitely polar opposites and impact the game in very different ways. You can't simply point to production in regard to points per game or rebounds, assists per game. That's not the right way to evaluate him or any other player for that fact. If you factor everything in here though, I think they're pretty similar and probably what the Lakers could generally get for Austin Reaves. Maybe slightly more than that, but somewhere in that general range. And no, I'm not saying they could or could not directly trade him for Herb Jones. I'm not sure the Pelicans would want that or be interested in it. I wouldn't doubt it, I guess, but I'm more so comparing their trade value, not trying to make a trade itself. And the question from it should be, should the Lakers trade Austin Reaves for that trade value? Or should they keep him and try to test the waters with that upcoming contract? Again, that's up for debate here, but the Lakers seem to be on the side of waiting it out and not trading him, believing that he will be worth that contract amount and maybe even more than that, or potentially might be willing to take a hometown discount, something that a previously undrafted player tried to do for their team, tapping Alex Caruso, but they did not take it, so maybe they learned their lesson and are trying to do things differently this time around with Austin Reaves. But regardless, the Lakers seem to be inclined to keep him rather than trade him this summer. So I guess let me know your thoughts about that. Do you think they're taking the right route or the wrong route? And what do you think they'll ultimately do with him? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. But then moving toward Dalton Knecht, they seem to be more inclined to trade him, especially compared to Austin Reaves, and more inclined to trade him rather than keep him. Whether you're talking about the Chris Mannix report or simply looking at their trade history with him, they literally did trade him, even though that trade fell apart, so maybe they might be inclined to trade him again. And well, I'm not entirely opposed to that, but I don't want them to treat him as a throw-in chip, aka simply making a trade with his contract and then throwing in their first-round draft pick to make the actual trade work and revolve it more around that rather than Dalton Knecht. I think that would be taking the wrong route with him. I mean, many fans seem to be treating him that way, whether it's via the trade machine or simply trade ideas. I've seen a bunch of trades that simply are not worth it with him in my opinion. Simply throwing him into any and every trade to make the trade work financially, kind of revolving the trades more around their first round draft pick rather than Dalton Knecht, which I don't think is the right route to take with him. Now I'm not saying he's the best rookie or rather former rookie in the NBA, but he definitely does have potential and could end up being a pretty good player that they might end up trading for a value that would not be worth it in my opinion. Again, not entirely opposed to trading him, but it should not be a trade that's not worth it for him. Even looking back in the Mark Williams trade, for example, I'm not sure that was worth it for him and they kind of did treat him as a throw-in chip. I mean, trading not only him, but then a first-round draft pick, 2 more future first-round draft pick swaps, and kind of just using his salary to make the trade work, I'm not sure that was the right way to go about it, especially for a guy that they ended up not making a trade for and finding a bunch of issues with. So hopefully they learn from that. If they eventually try to trade him again or include him in a trade, it should not simply be for salary filler. Rather, find a team that actually values him through a trade, might even be willing to make him the centerpiece of a trade and give him more than what they previously got for him. Don't simply make him the throw-in chip, don't trade him for a trade that's not worth it, and get rid of a talented young player that could potentially be a good fit for their long-term future and with Luka Doncic, which has been shown from their limited, albeit impressive two-man game numbers on the court last season. And with all of that being said here, what do you guys think? How do you feel about the likelihood or unlikelihood of the Lakers trading Dalton Knecht and or Austin Reaves this summer? Should they do it? Should they trade one of them, both of them, or neither of them? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. But I think that'll pretty much do it for this one, and if you enjoyed the video, then I'll greatly appreciate it if you dropped a like, subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and hit that notification bell to never miss out when I upload a video. But as always, thank you for watching and have a great day or night.